The NBA trade deadline, there are a lot of teams who might, take in players. Any thoughts on which team you might figure would do so?
Well, Toronto has already shown a willingness to trade to make deals. Pascal Siakam seems to be next up in the tube. There's a difficulty in trading him now in that his contract is expiring, and a team that would trade for him now would have to deal with that, or perhaps make a deal. But others would sort of sit back to see what's going on because they could get him later in the summer once his contract expires without having to give anything for him. Just give him the deal he wants. They're planning a rebuild around Scotty Barnes, a nice and promising young player, and just looking at what can be had to sort of drive that rebuild. And that's understandable. Teams do it.
Okay, another player we talked about in the last time we spoke, Zach Lavine. Do you see him moving? And also, where do you think he makes sense?
Well, I didn't think his trade value was very high when we talked last time. And I recently noted that a lot of the trade analysts are now saying his stock couldn't be lower. And so perhaps someone will strike a deal. I just think he's going to have to demonstrate some things, and he can, that he's going to be he's able to return from his injuries and play well and contribute to winning. And so it's going to require some things.
The NBA reinstated Draymond Green. Your thoughts on that, sir? Is it too early or is it just right?
Well, in terms of the Warriors, it's going to take him about a week to get ready to play. But, Chris Paul just broke his hand. And Chris Paul had actually been helping to cover for the absence of Draymond. And so for the Warriors, this couldn't have come at a better time. They need to have an effective and viable Draymond Green. He's always been very important. As I said the last time we spoke, he's a Hall of Famer, but it just depends on how he wants to finish up things. And he's been through a good bit of counseling in this time away. Now, a lot of those counseling sessions apparently have been done by Zoom meetings, and it's involved Rich Paul, his agent, who's head of Clutch, the sports agenting company. But he's lost a fair amount of money, which has saved the Warriors not just in what he lost, but in there's a penalty they pay for going over the cap, and the $2 million Draymond lost apparently has saved the Warriors $7 million. So that just shows the NBA is always a funny money business. It's hard to figure. But I do think things will be better. Uh, the Warriors are a team with a fair amount of drama. Jonathan Kuminga, the talented young player who's been in the starting lineup for 12 games, just announced out of nowhere that he's lost faith in Coach Steve Kerr, which has Steve Kerr shaking his head. He said, I probably have the the most open door policy of any NBA coach. And from what I know of Steve Kerr personally, that's certainly true. The other thing that makes it sort of mysterious is that Kuminga hadn't expressed these feelings to anyone, but he is a young fella. And as a young fella, I certainly made my share of stupid mistakes. Um, Others can. Even as an old fella, I still make my share of them. So it'll all work out. If anybody processes things and handles them pretty well, it's Steve Kerr.
Okay, sir. I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know what level of counseling Draymond went through. I mean, the 12 game suspension, yeah, it saved the Warriors, but coming back from that, do you see as what do you see any changes in Draymond Green? I mean, will it be softer, will it be cautious, or really I don't know. I'm befuddled what he might do.
Well, anytime you've had a season, anything close to what Draymond has had with all the conflict, and this is not just this season, it dates back. There's always going to be a watchful eye. I do think it's a great reset. And you don't know how counseling is going to work. You don't know if someone who has issues with control, with impulse control, can truly change. But I think it's a good beginning. If it if it wasn't the Warriors, if it was another team, I think it would be a much dimmer set of prospects for Draymond Green. But this is a veteran team that needs him. He knows what to do. He gives them a playmaker that allows Steph Curry to go off the ball more and be effective that way. Um, there are many things that Draymond, many chores that he does for that team. And, I think that being the veteran group, being the well coached team the Warriors are, being the very talented guy that Draymond Green is. Now, he will be 34 in March, but his game is not based on sort of super athletic scoring and those kinds of things. It's based on just the whole floor game that he plays. And so I don't think turning 34 is going to be a dramatic problem for Draymond. But I do see the odds being greater that they can get him back within the team. It's not clear yet how long Chris Paul is going to be out. He's broken. This is the other hand. Um, he's broken his hand twice before, I believe. And so this is a tough thing, but there's a sense he possibly can return. Obviously, there's still a lot of the season left to play. And so, the Warriors are just sort of hanging back there in the crowd. But they've done similar things before, and they could reemerge, particularly if Draymond returns on good behavior and really has an impact with the team. They've got to go through a week without him or Chris Paul. This is going to give them a chance to look at and to use and rely on younger players till Draymond is ready. But I think the Warriors. I always have liked the Warriors. I think they are obviously not the team they were, but I think they can come back and be a factor in the Western Conference for sure.
Don't you think? I mean, now I mean every time a player gets suspended, it other teams will try to get the goat of Draymond. I mean, to test him, just how well is he performed. Do you think that could happen? I'm thinking about someone like Dylan Brooks.
We're talking about Draymond Green, so yes, it's all on the table as in our previous conversations, I compared him to Dennis Rodman in some ways. And I just have to say, yes, you're going to have to be vigilant about those things, but that responsibility lies with Draymond. And this is it's not like these guys don't know him. And so there are going to be heated moments, and people are going to go at him, and he's going to have to be smart about that. It can be hard. Basketball's an emotional game, and if you're an emotional guy, that's part of your strength. It's also your greatest weakness, as it is with Draymond. It will be a challenge. I'm not saying it won't be challenge free. I just think the circumstances of the team, of its coaching, the whole thing, it's as stable a situation as can be for a player like Draymond returning from suspension.
Okay, I'd like to touch on Chris Paul. I mean, you mentioned earlier about the salary cap and Chris Paul's injury. I mean, there's talk going around that because of this injury, the Warriors won't be able to try to trade him because no teams will take on him because of his injury and his large contract. Your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, I really didn't see, particularly with Draymond being the question mark he remains, and considering, Chris Paul had really sort of fit in well, whether it was with the second unit or when he moved in as a starter. He helped stabilize things. I really don't see that as something that the Warriors are eager to rid themselves of. I think that Chris Paul will probably come back. He's had this run fitting in with the Warriors. I think his injury will heal enough that he can play. But I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know that for sure. But I think they would tend to keep those things because again, getting Steph Curry off the ball with the ball out of his hands so that they can do the things they do. That's sort of who the Warriors are. And so I just think uh, Draymond coming back, if he's ready, and it appears he is, you won't know. But with Draymond coming back, Chris Paul going out, the Warriors have a chance to continue to make progress. They'll also be featuring bit more of their younger players in the transition. And so, and those younger players, the Warriors know how to scout and acquire talent. And so there's always something bubbling on the agenda of a team like that. The NBA is pretty much a crazy train in a lot of ways. It's just lots of people making lots of money. Um, Always a challenge, always some high drama with the NBA. And that, it's a chemistry business. Basketball is as much about chemistry as any sport, any team sport. And so those factors are going to always be there in the NBA.
They've been losing since the in season tournament. Since that,
Right, right. No, they have not had a good run, and their fans are doing a meltdown, and they have all sorts of people saying that Coach Darvin Ham needs to go. And I don't see those things happening yet. There are people claiming the locker room is gone haywire. They're blaming LeBron, that LeBron can get weird with the chemistry of his teams if it's not going his way. He's a very powerful person in terms of just making things happen. He's also learned some tough lessons with the Lakers. I think that they'll find a way to settle down a bit, that they may end up making a deal. I'm not sure You know, they've had some success at the trade deadline. Uh, you know, and it's kind of hard to say what they'll do. They have some people they could cut loose in a trade. Um, I'm just not sure of the interest or what happens there. Um, they've had a good chemistry this season. They've played well. Now it was a short stretch in that in season tournament, and they came out of the gate okay. They have some questions. They've got to redefine some things, but it is Los Angeles. It provides its own hot seat. Those fans, that's a rabid group of fans, and they are spoiled. They've been spoiled since the days of the great Magic Johnson. And so, the media, they're grading the players. They're looking closely every game at who's doing what. You know, you can have LeBron James score 32 points and suddenly he's getting a B in the grades. I'm glad I didn't have to come through school with that grading system. And so we'll see. But, LeBron's aging. There are insecurities that creep in for, I don't care who you are. As you age, uh, insecurity is a factor. And I mean, LeBron James seems ageless to me. He does have some moments in the fourth quarter of late where he hasn't played well. And he's been carrying this team a lot. And so we'll see. I don't have a crystal ball as I reiterate, but I think they'll settle in some. Darvin Ham's being challenged as a coach. Coaches are not perfect. I haven't coached in the NBA, but I've coached in AAU, in public school here, and in various leagues, and it's always a guessing game. You can be a great coach for one stretch, and then things get a little haywire on you, and you're not a good coach. You can't seem to find answers. And that's just how it goes. I don't care what level you're coaching at. Even the great Tim Cohn will tell you, you have absolutely fantastic stretches, and then you have stretches where everything deserts you. Chemistry, your own sense of the team, uh, getting people to respond, making the right read on who should play when. It's an art far more than a science.
I'm just comparing. I mean, Darvin Ham with Frank Vogel. I mean, I was looking at how well he gave them a championship. I'm talking about Coach Frank Vogel. But after a season, they knocked him off. I mean, Darvin Ham. I'm not sure. What do you think? If assuming the Lakers fail to make it to the playoffs,
Oh, I don't know. Frank Vogel's a heck of a coach, and he came to the Lakers as an experienced coach. And I think you're seeing in Phoenix that he is a heck of a coach. That doesn't mean you're going to win a championship every season or make the playoffs every season, but the Suns are playing pretty well. And I think that hats off to Frank Vogel. Darvin Ham's learning. Let's face it, he's coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. That's a big deal. But he's learning as he goes. And everything I just said about coaching, I don't care what level, that applies to Darvin Ham. And so, things can get good as quickly as they can get bad. Now, what you don't want is for them to get bad and bad and bad and then worse. But I don't see that happening. I do think there's a lot of uncertainty before the trade deadline. I think insecurities with players who are, for example, D'Angelo Russell is talked about as the guy the Lakers can trade and make a move, uh, I, and that makes everybody uneasy because you could, if you're a player in that team atmosphere, you could be packaged in a deal. You don't know. And so that heightens the anxiety. Some people respond by playing really well, others respond by growing more insecure. And so it's hard to know. I do think, um, Phil Jackson used to burn the sage. It was a Native American thing, to burn sage to chase away the evil spirits. Phil Jackson, dating back to his days with the Bulls, would bang the tom tom and chant, "Hey, uh, going through the locker room. And the first time those Bulls saw him doing that, they thought he'd taken leave of his senses. I still wonder about Phil Jackson's good senses, some of the things I know he's done. But the point is that maybe Darvin Ham ought to burn a little sage. He doesn't need to beat the tom tom per se, but he probably needs to chase off the evil spirits. That's just a way of saying negativity can settle around any group, any team, any endeavor. It's um, it's just that basketball is the one playing on the main stage for the global audience. It's funny how American basketball is a chemistry lesson for all of us.
You mentioned about the Phoenix Suns. I mean, do you feel any frustration building around that team? I mean, they have a big three: Devin Booker, KD, and Bradley Beal. But those three players haven't really played together at all because either one of them or two of them are injured. Do you think that's frustrating anybody, especially Durant?
Oh, I don't think there's any question that it's frustrating. I do say this. The role players in Phoenix have played well. And the role players have shown that they can elevate their games. That's why they're having some success. And I think no one can really control injuries and things of that nature. But it's what you do in the absence. You lose a couple of major players, usually your team collapses. I feel just the opposite. The fact that the Suns haven't collapsed um, shows me that good things are happening. And I could be wrong. They could end up not fulfilling any sort of a promise. But, I just sort of, I think you have to see, it's one thing to have injuries and to be frustrated by those. It's another to not get along, to not like each other, to not play for each other, to not believe in your coach. Those kinds of things really sink teams. The other thing that sinks teams is when you have too many young players who don't really understand what it's all about yet, who haven't been in the league long enough and had enough success to get a decent perspective. Those teams can be really bad. And teams are like that. Look at the Spurs. There's no question that Victor Wembanyama is going to be at some point a great player. And if you look at the standings, we see teams that have suffered and been humiliated in the NBA. So many, Oklahoma City, any number of younger, Houston, it's not that they're rising and dominating, but we have a number of teams that have been through hard times that are playing well. And so I just think it's healthy. It's not going to be a Lakers league all the time. It shouldn't be. The Lakers are going to have to step up. Denver's not dominating. It's sitting right there ready to dominate. All these teams, now is when they start to get it together. They'll go into the All-Star break here in a month or so, and they'll evaluate things. They'll have been through the trading deadline right there. Some will add some chemistry touches. Others are going to barrel on. But the spring is when it often magically happens. Unless you've had one team just emerge at the start of the season and just comes out so strong, pounding everybody, like the Bulls did in 95, 96. You'll have teams like that are dominant. Denver was pretty dominant in a lot of ways last year. But this year, everybody sort of had to regroup and find their way along. And that has been created by younger teams emerging. And then lo and behold, here come the woeful Clippers. They're fitting in, they're playing, they're enjoying each other. They got a lot of veteran talent. They could stay healthy and be a factor. I sort of think it's a good thing to watch all this. Now, if you're locked in on the Lakers, you're in misery right now. You don't see anything good in the world. But if you're looking at the overall health, the Knicks have made their trade. They're playing well out of that trade. And uh, I just think, and there will be players traded at the trading deadline. DeJounte Murray, probably Atlanta, he's going to be traded. Kyle Kuzma in Washington could be traded. There are a list of those guys. Pascal Siakam um, is going to bring not a whole lot in return because, as we said, he's an expiring contract. But he could easily be dealt if there's one team that offers just the right thing to make it happen. If if Toronto thinks they can get something in a trade that helps that rebuild around Scotty Barnes, a piece of the puzzle, may not be a really big piece to the public, but it may be, a player who defends well or, has an overall floor game, then something could happen.
Yeah, speaking of rebuild, the Pistons, I mean, they're really spiraling right now. And top players like Kate Cunningham are really getting frustrated. Do you think they're going to blow it up as well?
Well, I think they would like to add a piece like that, and they're a team that needs something, and they're so desperate, and they have some assets. I think if Pascal Siakam goes somewhere, they put a player like that on that team who, has sort of made himself into a star. That may be the veteran presence that really helps that team elevate. I don't know that, but it well could be. And so Detroit might be that team. The Kings may. I think they've sort of backed out of the thing. Who really knows? Everybody sort of is in a poker game and they're trying to bluff each other. That's the NBA trading deadline. But I think the Pistons may have enough to where they might break Siakam loose because they can get him and he might help them down the stretch find something that they got to start selling tickets in the spring for next season. And one thing everybody overlooks is these teams have to have something. They have to have some hope, some belief to sell tickets. And to do that, the Pistons have got to create something. They've got to turn it around. And Siakam could do that for them, perhaps. I think he could. he's that kind of guy perhaps that could come in and give those younger players that need something on the floor. They have a good coach, but I've seen a lot of good coaches coach bad teams because the chemistry doesn't include belief. And guys have to believe they can go in and win a game. And when you're hopeless and you think you're getting your butt kicked, I've coached some really powerful teams, but I've also coached some teams that took a lot of butt whippings. And so you got to have you got to have those players on the floor that inspire belief that they can get things done, that they can make that difference.